The last book that Swami Kriyananda wrote before his passing in April 21st of 2013 was a book called Love Perfected, Life Divine. It was a book written originally by Marie Corelli, who was a very popular artist about 100 years ago, author 100 years ago in England. And it was the story of a man and a woman who were soulmates through many incarnations. It's actually, even Life Everlasting is a really marvelous book, and it's said to be the only novel that Paramahansa Yogananda read from all the way through, which is quite a compliment. And it was the last book he wrote, and it was about human love, but human love in the divine. And interestingly, it was a subject that had always interested Swamiji. It just was a matter of interest to him. Paramahansa Yogananda spoke of it once. And he said, because if he ever spoke of it more than once, everybody would forget God immediately and start looking for their soulmates. Perhaps you would say, not me, but maybe you would say, yes, I would. He talked about it when he interpreted the Bible, that which God has joined together, let no man put asunder, which has been interpreted to mean that divorce is against God's law. Swamiji, again, without any sentiment, said, it's not always a victory to stick it out to the end, is how he put it, if you sacrifice your spiritual life for a human consideration. But these are all very deep subjects, and you may wonder what it has to do with Easter. I'm getting there. I'm getting there, okay? In the context of talking about that, because Master said in that case, he said that everything in the creation is dual, including the soul, that the concept of soulmate is a valid concept, this sense that we belong somewhere and that there is another half. However, as Master put it when he explained it, the union of soulmates is not the physical union of romantic and physical love. It is the union of the highest dimension of ourselves coming into oneness. And he said, before you are liberated, you are united with your soulmate. But your soulmate could be on another planet. It could come in vision. It's not the romantic way that people talk about it. Now, of course, however, we love each other and we have relationships on more and more refined levels. That's self-evident. So I'm not speaking against it. And in fact, how do we ever learn to have that perfect union? We have to practice when it's easier, don't we? And this book is all about the awful mistakes that people make before they realize what true love really is. And now I'm getting to the part that counts. In the context of this, when Swami was writing this book and speaking of it, he said, every individual longs to be loved, speaking without sentiment, but truth. Everyone longs to be loved. And then Swami added, not just impersonally by God, but also personally by another human being. Everyone has that longing. And then he said, God would not plant that longing in the human heart if he didn't intend also to fulfill it. And that is the essence, that simple statement, when you really start going out with it, is the whole spiritual path in this sense. We have so many longings within us. So many parts of us are always just on the edge, a little nervous, a little unfulfilled, a little insecure, not quite sure, trying to make our place in this world, and everything is fine until it isn't. Read articles now about what AI is going to do to the whole educated class who always thought that we were secure, but now we're being like the weavers when they came in with the machines that could weave the cloth, and then all of a sudden a whole industry and a whole generations of livelihood is taken away. Or how about bombs? A friend of mine in Israel calls me periodically, not always from the bomb shelter, but often after having come out of it. Perfectly someone just like you and like me. We cannot depend on this world. We try our best. People die. Things change. Mass karma takes over. And it's just different. But the longing in the human heart to be secure, to be loved, to be able to express ourselves, to be seen, to be liked. I was so charmed by a near-death experience I read recently from a real interesting character, in case you want to look her up, Rosemary Thornton. She's worth looking up. She said, and she was sort of she described herself as a wacky misfit on this side. And she's there and she's with God and she's totally loved. And she said, it wasn't just that God loved me, he liked me. And it was such a sweet and interesting distinction. And then she babbled on a bit about nobody ever liked her because she was so wacky. And you could see, she was entertaining in small doses, but all of these things that we want, and that we feel incomplete without them, without that personal love, and the fear that we carry inside ourselves. Naturally, we're afraid. We have no control. We pretend we have control, and we try all these different ways to get it. We make ourselves beautiful, or we make ourselves rich, or we make ourselves dictatorial, or we shut everybody out and we make ourselves perfectly fine without any human contact. I mean, it's all a game. And the question is, if God really loves us, if there is such a thing as a loving God, why are we were made this way. Would God make us this way if he didn't also intend to fulfill it? You see, that's the path. So the question then comes is, why doesn't he? Why is it so confusing? Swami said something to me once about, just most people just struggle in life. Their lives never really work out. When he said it to me the first time, I said, sir, that's so cynical. I was quite a bit younger. He just very casually said, oh, you'll see. He wasn't dark about it, because without God, it's just as simple as that, without God. And this word worldly, which is the word we use, and it depends on which side of the spectrum you're on, you get upset about that or not. Worldly, everything that people think that means everything I want is bad. No, it's not bad. It's merely insufficient. And insufficient in many ways is worse. Because if it were just bad, we'd find out fast, wouldn't you? You pick up a piece of spoiled food and you can smell it or you taste it and you just spit it out. But all the things that tell us that all these things that we need and want are going to work for us, they all look pretty at the start, don't they? I'm a little, and this is not cynical, this is just an impersonal observation. As clergy, I've been clergy for many decades now, I've presided at quite a number of weddings and funerals. Now, of course, there's a certain aspect of funerals that makes them not quite as joyous as weddings, but there's a certain relaxation in a funeral because, well, whatever is. In a wedding, you're sure this one is going to be the right one, but you also have your fingers crossed, right? Especially as you get older and you realize how life goes on. But by the funeral, what is. Everybody can just relax. Here we are, like this. We've learned what we've learned, or we haven't learned it. And all these near-death experiences make you a little envious of who's ever in the coffin this time, because they've gone on to the next round, and this becomes the dream. So every so often these masters come, and they come regularly, and they've been coming since the beginning of time. Jesus was not the first. He was in a great line. This is the tradition of India, of Sanatana Dharma, the eternal truth. Whenever virtue declines, as the Gita says, and vice predominates, I, the infinite spirit, take visible form. And Swami in the festival says, a prayer of love went up from earth, and you responded. A ray of your light flashed out from the heart of infinity through night skies of consciousness and was born on earth for the redemption of mankind. That beautiful word, redemption of mankind in human form. And what that master comes to tell us, and every avatar, every master, every Christ, Jesus the Christ, the one who has, and it's actually the same word as Krishna. Krishna was also a title, the anointed one, the one who understands how much God loves us and how that love expresses and how we are to respond to it. And they just shock us out of our complacency. No more in every incarnation, the story of Jesus is one of the most shocking. Because Krishna at least was a king and he was in battle, and Buddha just was a king and renounced the world. But the story of Jesus is really it straightens your spine. Because he's really trying to tell you that what you seek will be given to you, but not in the way you're seeking it. And it doesn't mean that we can't live in this world. And the avatar is born in human form. Swami Kriyananda, who was a direct disciple of Yogananda, lived with Yogananda for the last 3.5 years. So Swami was 22 when he met, but by the time he was 26, Yogananda Master had left his body. Swami said to us once, mostly you think, oh, I would have been so much better if I could have been with Yogananda and had him talk to me and tell me things. At one point, Swami said, I'm not sure. Well, he said this in sort of a general way. A lot of people are better off never having met him, meaning never having been challenged by the dynamism of his personality. But on the other hand, he said to us, he said, in some ways, you're lucky never to have met him when he was in his physical body. Swami said, he said it was so confusing because you knew you were in the presence of God himself. There's no other way to say it, of a soul whose consciousness was infinite. And he said, and yet he would be on the telephone, or he would be riding in his car, or he would be having dinner, or dictating letters, reading jokes, something funny that he read. And then you would have to just sort of reconcile all of this. And if you can feel just the power and the spirit, you don't get confused by the human. But we are human, and we have to sort this whole thing out. That we can't bridge this gap by just leaping over it. And so what we have to learn to do is we have to pay attention to the scripture, pay attention to what is the reality around us, which is everything is an expression of the divine. And everything is lovable and beautiful as a divine expression, not for what it is in itself. Toward the end of his life, Swamiji had he called it a dream, but I'm sure he meant he had a vision. Swami always understated his own state of consciousness. He always played it down rather than played it up, except occasionally. He would speak more frankly. He didn't think it helped us to sort of feel too much distance. He said he had this realization, this dream, as he put it, and he saw all these human beings. And some of them were good and kind, and some of them were evil and hurting people. And some of them were sad, some of them were joyous. But he saw that inside of everyone was the same longing. That everyone longs for happiness, longs not to suffer, wants to be loved. Same. And Swami said in the dream, he said his heart just opened completely to everyone, not because of who they are, but because of who made them and what's behind them, of that divine love. And so Swami moved through this world like anyone else would move through this world, but he moved through this world in a constant state of loving. And he was also not afraid. Because the opposite of love is fear. This is St. John in the Bible, one of the greatest statements ever made, but I can pull out 100,000 others that are also the greatest ever made. Just depends on the day of the week. But perfect love casts out all fear. Swami wrote a song called I Live Without Fear. And in so many places that statement of St. John's was actually when I was 18 years old and I first discovered the spiritual path, I read that line in a book by Swami Vivekananda. It was a long time later I found out it was from the New Testament. Perfect love casts out fear. And it just went into me like this. Just like, oh, what can that possibly mean? Where can that go? And I remember one day in my apartment where I lived at that time, I had the thought, what would it feel like if all fear were taken away? And I remember I started up the stairs, and for the distance that it took me to go up 3 stairs, I was unafraid. You see? And in that, everything I've ever wanted was given to me. Because once you stop being afraid, but how can you stop being afraid in this terribly insecure world? And we come in with this idea that this world is supposed to work. You know, that it's supposed to be this way, that I'll do this and I'll get that, and they'll do this and they'll get that, and these people are not supposed to suffer, and why is it not like this, and why is an idiot in charge, and why isn't my idiot in charge instead of that idiot, you know? It just goes on and on like that, and we act like, you know, like we're the ones who know, and sometimes we even tell God that he's making a mistake. It's a little presumptuous on our part, a little arrogant. Stop and ask yourself for a minute, who told you it's supposed to be like that? If you want to listen, you listen to Buddha, and you listen to Krishna, and you listen to Christ. You listen to Jesus the Christ. And you watch how he lived and what he did. That's the whole story. And the drama of his life as a template for the way we live is so much the same. He came back. He gathered his disciples. He follow me, he said. And so they become, like we do, they become excited. This is it. I found something. In this case, they really had found something. But you see, that's the enthusiasm. We find something, and then we get deeper into it, and then we get friends who feel just like us. Now, in the case of the disciples, it was the right thing. But that's the process, isn't it? We get excited. We start doing all these things like this. And then it begins to develop. It gets deeper. There's challenging. What happened just before the end of Christ's life is so amazing. He'd been going everywhere. He'd started doing healings. He started doing miracles. He raised Lazarus from the dead, and a lot of people saw it. Lazarus was really dead. Really dead. There was no possibility that he wasn't dead. You know, even when there's so many, just when you get human about it and aren't too much in awe, there's so many marvelous phrases in the Bible. Jesus heard that Lazarus was sick. His sisters, Mary and Martha, called and wanted him to come, but he didn't come. He deliberately did not come because they knew he could heal him. He didn't come. He didn't come till after Lazarus was dead. He'd been, I believe, in the tomb for a few days. And then Jesus comes and Mary weeps. If you'd been here, he wouldn't have died. He says, open the tomb. And then in the tomb, then it says, sir, he's been in there for a while. He stinketh. I mean, it's so human. It's like, Lord, I'll do what you say, but this is not going to be pleasant. So they open the tomb, and Jesus calls his name, and he walks out like this. That's why they were so excited in Jerusalem. Is he going to come? Is he going to come? Because everybody knew about all of this. And then there's this triumphant entry. It couldn't have been more triumphant. The very stones will ring out, you know, if we silence the people. And so you think, it's going to work. You know, now, we the oppressed people, we're going to have our moment. The Messiah has come. Does that sound familiar? How many times have you found the solution? And it's going to work. And everybody's cheering. And you think, this is finally it. You know, I've finally made the world do what I think it always should have been doing, which is taking care of me in the way that I think it should. And then, of course, it didn't work out that way for Jesus, did it? You know, but he just walked through without regard for any of that. This is God's will. Even now, legions of angels could rescue me. but it is not my Father's will that that happen. So he lived through, the adulation and then the up and the down, and he did his part. He did it with power, but he was never doing that. He was doing God's will. Mother Teresa of Calcutta, in a little interview, just a snippet with a journalist that I thought was so beautiful, this journalist starts challenging her. She took care of the poorest of the poor in Calcutta, where she had her centers there, in many places in the world. And some journalist is saying, well, don't you think that, certain charities and certain government authorities can take care of more people? I mean, per capita, how many sick people do your nuns help after all? I mean, it wasn't that bad, but it was pretty close to it. And, if you really want to help the poor, isn't there a better way to help the poor? And she said, I'm not helping the poor. The journalist was, sort of looked at her. She said, I'm doing what Jesus told me to do. You see the difference? That's how you live in this world. Whatever it is, whatever you feel to do, it's fine. But don't do it for its own sake. Do it because God told you to do it. I was working on a very big project once. The details are not important. 18 months of incredibly intense work trying to make this. We're trying to incorporate Ananda Village as a California city. I won't go into more details. It's too late. 18 months of just absolutely constant, absolute opposition by the entire county of Nevada County up there. Every public hearing was in a bigger and bigger hall until finally we're with 800 people in a hearing that goes till 2 a.m, and everybody's against us, and we lost, just lost like that. But we had a case. We could appeal to the, like this, and I'm like this doing it. And then Swami decides we're not going to do it anymore. Like that. And it was, I'm just like in mid-step, and all of a sudden it stopped. He had very good reasons, persuasive reasons, but the main one was he felt it was wrong. And Swami, I believe him more than I believe myself. It was really interesting because there I was. Why was I doing this? And I realized, I was doing it because I felt that it was divinely right to do it. So if it's not divinely right, and there's several ways to tell. You don't always have Swami to tell you. If it doesn't work and it's taken away from you, that's a clue. Sometimes it's a clue to try harder, but often it's a clue not. You have to just know, but what is my life for? And see, that's the game that this whole planet's about. We think this planet is about making this planet good. No. This planet is to teach us what causes suffering and what brings happiness, what causes fear and what alleviates fear. Yeah, in one of the songs that they sang today, to all who love the gift is given, joy and freedom evermore. Would God have planted that desire in our hearts if he didn't intend to fulfill it? But he can only fulfill it when we return to him. And that's the story of Jesus. Jesus goes through the worst that you can possibly imagine and then just dusts himself off and says, oh yeah, so what? This is the will of my Father, and this is how the story ends. The story ends in glory. Jesus didn't just appear in that room. For 40 days, Jesus kept appearing. There was no mistake about what happened, and he wanted us to understand. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all things will be added unto you. Glorious, yes? God bless you.